It is live now on Facebook, and Dr. Joanna Kujawa was going to send me a bio, but enough to say, Joanna, that you are an academic, yes, with a real strong expertise in the sacred feminine. So you've been with Unity Earth at Fields of Healing in Byron Bay, where you ran different workshops, and we're really delighted to have you with us today in World Unity Week. Welcome to World Unity Week, and over to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ben, and I'd like to thank everybody for organizing this and also for giving me the space. I feel really honored, and thank you especially to Ben and Irina who invited me. So I think we'll just proceed with the presentation, just a moment, on Shakti and the divine faces of divine feminine. So can we see this well? Yes? Yeah, can you see? Okay. So, okay. So as any decent presenter, I'm going to tell you also what I'm going to be talking about to start with, right? So the title of presentation is Faces of Shakti, or Archetypes of Divine Feminine in Hindu mythology, or different faces of Shakti. So first of all, I will tell you what are the archetypes very quickly, no definitions, I promise, and then very briefly also, where does Shakti come from? Why actually we are talking about divine feminine in Hinduism, and then the main topic, which Hindu goddesses as archetypes for us today, how they can guide us and how we can learn from them, and at the end, basically, so what? Basically, why bother to talk about it? So when we talk about archetypes, and I promise not to get too academic, we basically mean like images in our subconscious mind. So I'm using here terminology from Carl Jung, who's a Swiss psychoanalyst, and he basically said that there are like images in our subconscious mind that we inherit as humanity. So everybody has these images. They're just like these ancient stories that perhaps are somehow on an unconscious level passed to us by ancestors, for example. And so they're like stamps or images in our minds. And they develop over a period of time, and they guide us. What is really important about archetypes is that they can guide us, but they work for us if we use them in a conscious way, but sometimes because they can explain, for example, why am I interested in this? Why do I want to do this? Why I'm passionate about that? But if we are not conscious, about which archetype we follow, then we may feel lost. We don't understand why we're making certain choices in our lives. So then they kind of rule our lives because we are not in control of them, so to speak. So when we talk about goddesses, first of all, I would like to say that very often in Hinduism, Hinduism is misunderstood very often as a religion of many gods, because actually they are talking about aspects of the divine, right? So goddesses are basically different aspects of the divine. So I prefer to use the word divine rather than God, for example, because then the gender is being removed, right? Lots of people, especially in the West, don't like the word God because they want to focus on the divine, which is both, feminine and masculine and everything else. So when I talk about goddesses, it's not only the archetypes, but also basically feminine aspects of the divine. And also more practically, there are basically different aspects also of our personality. So in Hinduism, who is Shakti and where does she come from? So in my personal journey, when I was a little bit disappointed with my original religion, and I started on the path of yoga, and here I wanted to thank all yoga teachers in my life and all yoga teachers everywhere, because you are basically a doorway to new spirituality for lots of people. Right? So people sometimes are disappointed with the, traditional beliefs, or feel a little bit lost, or maybe they lost faith. And yoga teachers offer a new opportunity for people to explore spirituality in a different way. And this is what happened to me too. So first of all, thank you to all yoga teachers. So when I was still in Toronto, I had a yoga teacher who had a wonderful library, and he was lending us books, and I read all his books. And, this is how my journey really started. This is how I started to be interested also in Shakti and divine feminine in Hinduism, because I realized that Hinduism has such a has such a rich pantheon of gods and goddesses that there is a place for everybody. And I was struck by the fact that there is an equal element of feminine in Hinduism as much as masculine. So it's not only that there are gods, but there are also goddesses. And for example, if the main god in some traditions is Shiva, he's also connected with Shakti. So he's the male god and she's the feminine goddess. And she's always defined in very beautiful ways. So for example, if Shiva is this kind of god who is always in meditation and actually lost in his meditation. So he's perfectly content and satisfied with himself. And his first thought is Shakti. So she's his first thought and his activity. So he decides to do something. So she's his action as well. So she is like the creative, active aspect of Shiva, of divine masculine, which is very cute. You can imagine this, for example, Shiva is sitting like this perfect yogi, and the Shakti kind of pats him on his shoulder and says, okay, Shiva, like, what's up? What are we going to do? Are we going just to sit and meditate, or are we going to manifest the world? Are we going to create? So actually, she's the creative aspect of the divine as well. And in Hindu scriptures, she's often described as this primordial, inconceivable energy. So she is not only the first thought and first action of the divine, but she's also the energy which flows through everything. And so she creates the universes. She is the creatrix, actually, of everything, because Shiva is the kind of meditator. He meditates very content in his meditative state, and then Shakti comes and she creates everything. She's the energy. And now we know from physics that, of course, everything in the universe is in energy. So every time when I read something about modern physics, I say that it actually confirms what Hinduism was telling for a long time, that everything is energy, and this energy is Shakti. And there's a long oral tradition, which means spoken tradition, before anything was written in any religion. But for example, in Hinduism, the first mention of goddess that is written comes from a long time ago, which is 800 before Common Era, in Kena Upanishads, and they speak about goddess Uma. And I will just read very quickly what it says. Indra, lord of the Devas, which means lord of all gods, while seriously reflecting, I said, right, that he's always in meditation, while seriously reflecting, was approached by knowledge in the form of a woman supremely charming. Yay! So, this is the beauty of Shakti, she's not only wise, but she's also supremely charming, which means she doesn't lose this kind of nice feminine qualities. And later I will talk about it, how they are different from, for example, from Greek goddesses. And adorned in gold, appeared to dispel his ignorance. So this is she's the Shakti, the goddess Uma, that dispelled the ignorance and brought joy to Lord of the gods, Indra. So it is a very beautiful tradition, right? So, and this is one of the figurines of goddess Uma. This is just an introduction before I move to the archetypes. So, she's wise and she's beautiful and supremely charming. I mean, isn't it wonderful? So it kind of, in mythological sense, shows, how she was the first thought and the first action and the energy of the divine, right? Or of Shiva, of God. And also in Hinduism, because it is such a beautiful and rich tradition, there is a tradition of Shaktism, when actually Shakti is concerned one of the main deity. Doesn't mean that she's the only one, and this is another thing about Hinduism. It is that she's an aspect of God, the aspect of the divine as the feminine. And also the same in Tantra, which I am not going to discuss much, and which is often misunderstood in the West, but Tantra is also a form of worship of Shakti in her different forms. So Hinduism is such a beautiful and rich tradition that allows for different aspects of the feminine. By the way, if anyone wants to ask a question at any time, please feel free. So now I'm moving to, so it was just
on that, Joanna, that if they're asking a question in the Facebook feed, maybe Irina and I and Nina can keep an eye out for what people are saying, and we can let you know what people are asking in the Facebook. A thumbs up.
That would be good. That would be good. If someone is watching and has a question, that would be good, because I don't want to get distracted. I don't see it because I keep my PowerPoint here and I see you, so I don't see much. Apart from this, thank you. That would be really good. So And Shaktism very often is associated with goddess Kali, which I'll discuss later, and Tantra of goddess Shakti, and her worship in more kind of unusual forms when everything is considered divine. Okay, so the main topic actually of this presentation is faces of Shakti, you know, as different archetypes, and I'm going to talk about archetypes or images or choices or types, you could say, or in personalities for people who are householders. I'm not talking right now necessarily about people who are nuns and monks, you know, because they may make different choices. But here I'm going to talk about the choices for householders, but also in both ways, mundane way, you know, in a very practical way, and also in a spiritual way, very quickly. And I'm going to talk also about their shadows, because each archetype has a shadow. So the first and most traditional archetype, and also please tell me if I'm speaking too fast, because sometimes my students tell me I speak too fast, okay? So I'm used to it, you know, so no problem whatsoever. So first archetype, which is a traditional archetype, and is the
Joanna, you're speaking too fast.
Okay.
Just take a breath. Take a breath.
Okay.
Let's feel the spirit of what you're saying and not just the information.
Okay.
If we can, that'd be great.
The presentation is amazing, and the images and everything. Yeah, just maybe slow down a little bit and
okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. 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 So one of the more traditional archetypes for divine feminine in Hinduism, is it better? In Hinduism is Parvati. So Parvati was always described as the consort to God Shiva. So that's why here I'm kind of joking, and I wanted to change it, and I said, and the lucky man that was married to her was Shiva, just to change it, right? So she's Parvati and she's married to Shiva, and I was trying to speak of her separately from Shiva, but it's actually impossible to speak about Parvati in separation from Shiva, and this is why, because Shiva and Parvati are one. Which means that, which is both may have some positive and negative things. The positive things are that she represents the perfect, in mundane terms, this perfect wife and perfect mother. And she also, but she's more than just perfect wife and perfect mother. She also possesses lots of inner strength. So it means she provides the strength for her partner. Without her, Shiva is nothing. There is the same in Hinduism, Shiva without Shakti, and here Parvati is a corpse, right? So she is they are the two polarities that are meeting beautifully in a sacred marriage. So she is this perfect goddess, you know, the perfect feminine, with all these traditional feminine qualities, such as wife and a mother. And he is this perfect masculine, traditional example when he plays the part of a provider for the family. And so this is this kind of traditional sacred marriage with two polarities of masculine and feminine meet in a beautiful union. And lots of people nowadays as well, you know, are very happy with this kind of archetype of masculine and feminine that meet in oneness, but they need each other. So I mean, Parvati without Shiva cannot fulfill her part, so to speak, in life. And Shiva without Parvati cannot fulfill his part in life, because from a kind of mundane point of view, you could say, what's the point of having a good job and a nice house and a nice car if you have nobody to come back home to, so to speak, right? So this is from Shiva's point of view. And Parvati actually identifies herself through her relationship to Shiva, but both actually identify themselves through their relationship to their partner. Am I clear here? So they represent beautiful union of masculine and feminine, but they are dependent on each other completely. Without each other, you know, they need each other to complete themselves, right? So this is the union of, it's often called a sacred marriage in Hinduism, right? So so this is this very traditional archetype, and lots of couples still love to follow this archetype of Shiva and Shakti, very distinctly define roles between a man and a woman, so to speak, and together they create this wonderful unity, but without each other, you know, we cannot fulfill that role in life. Now, Radha is the second very popular archetype in Hinduism, and it's very interesting because every time I talk about Radha, everybody tells me, both women and men, oh, I love Radha, she's so beautiful, she's so wonderful, I completely love Radha. So and that's why I chose also this beautiful imagery, because she is gorgeous, right? She's completely gorgeous, but what does she represent? So Radha represents the romantic longing in a mundane way, in a mundane kind of, in our worldly life. She is the romantic, or sometimes people call erotic longing. She wants to just merge with her beloved. She doesn't think about consequences of this. She wants to be one with him. And in traditional Hindu stories, she is in love with Krishna, with Lord Krishna. She is the milkmaid or a gopi, who are called gopis, and she falls in love with Krishna, and Krishna falls in love with her. So this is this kind of romantic love which cannot be truly fulfilled, because in some ways, and Jayadeva in 12th century wrote about it, famous Hindu poet, that according to his story, both Krishna was married to somebody and Radha was married to someone else. So, you know, it was kind of scandalous in a way, but they were joined through this kind of romantic longing together. So in spiritual terms, Radha represents the desire to merge with the beloved, with the divine as a beloved. So she is the example also of surrender to the beloved. So very often when we talk about Rumi is nowadays very popular, and Sufi movement as well. So this is a kind of very similar concept that comes also from Radha, which is basically complete desire for the union with the divine. And all mystics really can look into the lineage back to Radha. So all great mystics, whether Eastern or Western, basically people who are looking for an original spiritual experience and want to merge with God are like Radha, right? So she represents the bliss or the ecstasy of ecstasy of merging with the divine, whether on a mundane level or whether on a spiritual level. So it's ecstasy and actually bliss as well. Actually, the Bhakti movement, she's a Bhakti, which means a devotional type of yoga, as all yogis know. And she's actually connected to the Bhakta path simply because very often the path of wisdom, of which I will speak later, was limited only to a powerful men and Brahmins. When Bhakta yoga was open to everybody, including people from lower castes, and including women. So Bhakta path was, or the path of service and devotion was open for everybody, and it is also connected with Radha. So what are examples of Radhas in mystical movements? So in Hinduism, for example, in the 16th century was a female poet called Mirabai, who wrote beautiful poems about Radha and about Krishna and about this desire to merge with the beloved, you know, so divine as the beloved, or like the friend in Sufism and so on. So it's very similar, very similar. And in Western religions, for example, in Christianity, we have Teresa of Avila, which also very often is presented as, you know, in this ecstatic union with the beloved as Christ. Right? So it's kind of mystical union with the beloved. So that's Radha, and I think that's why everybody loves her, because it's all about this beautiful, very innocent surrender to the beloved and to the divine. So what happens if we are faced in our mundane lives with a shadow, you know, of Radha? So basically, if you are a hopeless romantic, right? That you are always falling for the wrong person or for an unachievable man or an achievable woman, then it's a shadow Radha. Or there are some people, for example, who cannot move beyond the romantic high of the beginning of relationship, and then they move to another relationship. And we know that every relationship usually starts beautifully, and then we face problems that we have to solve or do something about it. So some people cannot move past it. They just want to be in this romantic high all the time. So then this would be the shadow of Radha, right? In mundane terms. In spiritual terms, she is this beautiful, innocent surrender towards the beloved and towards the divine. So everybody gets ecstatic, for example, in yoga tradition, singing the kirtans for Krishna and for Radha, right? Because this is this beautiful union of masculine and feminine in a kind of very romantic way. You know, there's a romantic desire behind it, which is then later transformed into mystical experience. So it's a very beautiful archetype. So that's and there are many more others. And actually, I just want to stress that Radha doesn't mean that you have to be a woman in mystical terms. Lots of mystics, any mystic, whether a man or a woman, can identify with Radha, right? Because this is all about the union with the divine, which is very, very much a mystical union. Okay, so now we are moving to another goddess, and I have a picture of her behind me, and it is Saraswati. Saraswati is very close to me because I am trying to follow the path of Saraswati. I would be interested to know what path Irina is following, or anybody else. I think that I'm following the path of Saraswati. Doesn't mean that we have to be extremely successful on the path, but you know, we follow the path, right? So she's the goddess of wisdom and discernment. So how could we understand the goddess of wisdom and discernment? So first of all, with discernment, there are a few things. She understands the difference between, for example, knowledge and information, or information of wisdom. She is also the goddess of language. So if you love to talk, you know, you love to write, you probably goddess Saraswati. But discernment also means that she can discern between higher and lower level of speech, and higher and a lower level of thought. So for example, Saraswati understands that there's a divine language and there's a mundane language. She understands that there is a language that brings us unity and that brings us war. So she is a goddess of discernment as well. She knows what if, for example, you're very good in understanding that you can observe your own thinking process, and you say, I think that my thinking right now is going in a wrong direction because I'm feeling really bad and I'm creating this harmony within my being, then you are also a Saraswati. Because you can catch yourself, you know, what you're thinking and what you're saying. You're very careful, but for example, if you do affirmations, for example, which were picked up also by New Age movement, it's also kind of a Saraswati path, because you try to choose, you know, what you're thinking about and what you want to affirm and attract in your life. So this is also Saraswati path. So who would be a Saraswati in our lives? So I would like to, for example, bring up the book here. If somebody didn't read it, yes, it's Awakening Shakti by Sally Campton, Awakening Shakti. And Sally Campton is former Swami for many, many years. She's giving lots of workshops, and she's a very accomplished author and very committed yogini. So she is the authority for women about, you know, about Hindu goddesses and so on. And she actually identifies herself also in her book as Saraswati. So who is Saraswati? So Saraswati could be a woman who, because we're talking about discernment here, on one level, she could be just a professional woman, which means that a woman who makes independent choices, and she decided not to play the part of Parvati, or the part of the wife, and and a mother as her primary role. Doesn't mean that she cannot be a wife and a mother, but it's not.
Joanna, we have a comment. Is now a good time to insert a comment?
Sure.
Bradley Kelly, who I know as a dear friend and uncle, is saying perhaps Joanna could talk to the androgynous whole that is symbolized through the union of Shiva and Shakti.
Yes, I can talk about it. Yes, I can talk about it. So Shiva and Shakti. So a little bit, in a way, I try to discuss it through the example of Parvati and Shiva, because Parvati is an aspect of Shakti, of divine and feminine. So together, as I said, they create this kind of union of Shiva and Shakti, which means of masculine and feminine. However, in spiritual terms, and thank you for this comment, that's a very good comment, thank you, this question. If you are a yogini, if you are a spiritual practitioner, what you also try to do, you try to bring this feminine and masculine aspect of yourself into spiritual, what is called androgyny, which means that your masculine and your feminine aspect within your own being is balanced. So if you're a man, you embrace also the feminine aspect of your being. So like you would say you're a man, so you're animus, but you of course have anima, which is the feminine aspect in you, which is like yin and yang. Nobody's completely yin, nobody's completely yang. So thank you for this comment, because I was perhaps a little bit radical here. So it means if you're a man, you embrace, or if you are not sure what your feminine side is, maybe it could be your vulnerable side, you explore it, you're open to exploring this. And if you're a woman, for example, and perhaps you're even happy with, you feel that you're very feminine and you're happy with your role in your life, but you want to discover what is your masculine part. And in many spiritual scriptures, not only in Hinduism, but also in many Christian scriptures and any scriptures that discuss masculine and feminine, they talk about, a spiritual androgyny. So a fully evolved being, or in Hindu terms, maybe enlightened being, brings the feminine and masculine into perfect balance into that being. Does it help with explanation? Because I think
it's wonderful. Yes, we'll see what Brad thinks in the comments, but I thought it was wonderful.
Okay, thank you so much. So it's a little bit like yin and yang. We are a little bit more, like I'm probably more feminine than masculine, but I do have lots of masculine in me, and I acknowledge it, right? And I'm trying to bring it to some kind of balance. And the same goes for a man who can be very masculine, but everybody has some feminine elements. And it's actually a goal of many spiritual traditions that they said that some scriptures say that this is actually the first step towards enlightenment. You have to reach this balance between masculine and feminine within your being before you can be enlightened. But of course, not necessarily, because as I was talking about Radha, you can reach it also, for example, through bliss and merge with the divine through service and devotion. But so this is one of many paths. And this is another thing that I really appreciate about Hinduism. It is that there are many paths. There's not just one path, right? So we can get there, whatever there is, the moments of enlightenment, many enlightenments actually, because it's a process over and over again by many paths. So thank you. I really appreciate this comment, because I just don't want to talk, and not knowing.
Bradley said thank you, so he's happy with your answer.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. So because we can go into different direction with presentation, I just prepared something, but we can go in a completely different direction. So Saraswati, so for Saraswati, it is very important, and she teaches us how to use our thoughts and our language. So I'm just trying to generalize it rather than going to mythology. If we think, higher thoughts, so what kind of language do you use? So in Sanskrit, they said Saraswati uses para language, means the divine language. She understands that, the way she speaks and the way she thinks will affect her life and the lives of people around her, basically. I'm kind of simplifying, right? So there are different levels of language. There's intuitive language in Hinduism, divine language, and there's a gross language, and there's gross. And this gross language and gross thoughts will take you to gross reality. So basically, what you think and what you speak will give you a different experience of reality. So Saraswati would argue that there is not only one level of reality, but your reality depends on your way of thinking and your way of speaking, right? Because there's a power she understands the power of thinking and the power of speech, the power of thought and the power of speech. So we can be in the same room, and if you have gross thoughts, and gross, which means slower, and if you have gross, you use gross language, and next person next to you will have you using higher vibration, you could say in New Age parlance, thoughts and language, they are going to have a completely different experience of reality. Right? So she is this goddess of discernment. This is part of her wisdom. So it's not only about accumulation of knowledge, for example, for Saraswati, it's basically about discernment, knowing what is important, also another quality of Saraswati, and knowing what you should let go, right? Because, you know, it makes your experience of reality that much more difficult, so to speak, and unpleasant, but also it doesn't take you to your spiritual goals.
Can I ask a quick question? And I know you've got more archetypes to go through, but I just want to, because you made me think a little bit when you said you'd love to know which type I am or everyone is. Is it possible to, obviously at a certain point in your life, you'll be a different type. Is it possible that that you're using energy of different type in every different situation?
Absolutely. And I think that's why they're just aspects of our personality. This is what I was trying to say at the beginning of this presentation when I was speaking too fast. So absolutely, you know, I'm probably on the path of Saraswati just professionally, right? Being an academic and a writer, but I have many other qualities. I've been Radha in my life, you know, I had my Radha moments, right? And now later when I'm going to speak about Lakshmi, I actually want to develop a little bit more of Lakshmi, which is, I'll speak about her in a moment, and I can tell you why. And when I speak about Durga, there is a strong Durga in me too. You know, I'm a little bit of a fighter and a warrior, especially if I see a good cause.
Durga. So probably a good time to say that Antoinette Root's daughter has joined the Zoom room as well. She's definitely got a lot of that energy as well, Joanna. Joe, I just wanted to mention that Antoinette Root's daughter.
Fantastic. Hi, Antoinette. I know precisely who you are. I'm so glad you are here. Thank you. I know you very well, you know, from Facebook and from Ben's events. So I'm really glad you're here. Hello. Yeah. So when we get to Durga, you probably can identify with this because Ben says you are the warrior goddess. So absolutely, Irina. In different life situations, we can be different. We can use different aspects of our personality and different goddesses, and I think it is completely appropriate. You know, sometimes you have to stand up for a cause. You cannot just be a Radha, right? In a sense where you just surrender. Sometimes it's not appropriate to surrender. Sometimes you have to use your discernment, right? Because you're going to have a life that you don't want to have, or you're going to be taken away from your spiritual goals and so on. And sometimes you even can be a Kali, which I discussed, you know, almost at the very end, you know, and when some gross injustice happens, then you can bring up the Kali in you. And in fact, in one very difficult situation in my life, my private life, many years ago when I was actually chanting the Durga Kali chants that really helped me, because I needed this strong feminine energy, you know, in me. You know, so, and I needed this energy feminine because it had to do with relationship. So I didn't know how to empower myself in a relationship as a woman. So just chanting names of Durga and Kali, to which I moved in a moment, really helped me. So in this case, it was appropriate. So we're completely right. You know, it's impossible. You know, they're just aspects of us. Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. Thank you. So when we talk about Saraswati, somebody may have to, I have to look at the time, but I'm not going to be carried away. So Saraswati could be a professional woman, but she would be also a woman that is very unconventional. So for example, it could be a woman who had a corporate career and decided to be a yoga teacher or go to India. That's also Saraswati, because she is capable of discernment. She's starting to do some choices that she believes are higher choices in her life right now, right? Or it could be, I know one academic who went to India and then became a Swami and a spiritual teacher, right? So he would be also, and in fact, all Swamis are called Saraswati because they chose the higher path, right? Whether masculine or feminine. So it's a professional woman and so on. But it's also a woman who makes unconventional choices and very often away from the traditional choice, right? Sometimes Sally Campton, especially in her book, but I do not necessarily agree with her on this, they said that they very often choose a way of not following this traditional path, of not being a wife, right? Because it's very difficult sometimes for a woman to juggle these things, but I think it's probably possible. It depends on choices. So just very quickly, I would say, so what is the shadow of Saraswati? So it's somebody who is using their knowledge and their language skills for, not for a good cause. You know, they like this discernment. So that's why, and I hope I'm not insulting anybody, some kind of PR professional for some horrible company, for example. So, or somebody who is a corporate person, but all they care is profit. And they use their knowledge only for profit. And profit is a wonderful thing, but not if it's at the cost of many lives and environment and so on. So it's somebody who uses their knowledge or language for a wrong cause. Or for example, writing an untruthful speech for a politician, simply so the politician can win an election. That would be Saraswati that went dark, so to speak. It's a shadow of Saraswati because, and lots of people, you know, can choose to do this because there are some earthly rewards. But then, according to Hindu philosophy, they don't have discernment. They don't understand that they went off the path, so to speak. They went to the shadow, so to speak, of an archetype. Now, Lakshmi, and I'm kind of aware of my timing right now, she's the goddess of earthly empowerment. Although very often nowadays we kind of idealize her as, you know, she's also a goddess of spiritual abundance, which she is, but traditionally she's called the goddess, the auspicious goddess, and she's all about inner and outer empowerment. So this is what she truly is about. Lakshmi is about inner and outer empowerment. So she's also about empowerment in your life. So if you can call upon Goddess Lakshmi, for example, when you feel that you somehow in some part of your life you're disempowered, and we all have these parts in our lives. You may be empowered professionally, but not in your relationships, or maybe you're empowered in your relationships, but you know, not professionally, or perhaps, you know, you want to discover the meaning of life or something like that, and there's certain dispowerment there in your spiritual path. So you call upon the quality or archetype of Goddess Lakshmi when you seek empowerment. However, no outer empowerment, as you know, on a spiritual path can come first from the inner empowerment. So even on your spiritual path, you know, you have to have this inner empowerment within yourself first to be empowered externally. But traditionally, she's about external empowerment. She's about success, power, and also beauty. So very often visual artists and musicians, Antoinette, are following the path of Lakshmi as well. So because she is a kind of patron of artists as well. Like maybe like Saraswati would be a patron of writers and academics and so on. Lakshmi would be is a patron of artists, visual artists, and musicians as well. So it's quite interesting. So what would be the shadow of Lakshmi? It would be the gold digger. You know, somebody who is using their beauty and empowerment to take advantage of someone else. Or there may be a trophy wife, right? So somebody who is disempowered and tries to bring this empowerment from someone else. So it's Goddess Lakshmi. Lakshmi is about our empowerment. And if we want to call upon Lakshmi, it means that we first want to discern where we are disempowered in our lives, and then look into this, into empowerment, to Goddess Lakshmi. Okay. Now, if there are no other questions, I'm going to move to Durga. Goddess Durga, as we can see here on this picture, she is often portrayed riding a lion or a tiger. Why? Because she is in full control of her inner demons. You know, she is in control of her Shaktis, as very often it is called in Tantric Hinduism. So she's in control of her own powers. She's not deluded, the scriptures say, by her powers. She's in control of her powers. So she's in control of her own tendencies, good and bad, but she's also in control of her worldly environment. But her main concern is she's called the slayer of evil. So she is basically the archetype of an activist. So Durga, for example, sees some injustice somewhere. So for me, for example, when I was young, I'm environmentalist, so I saw environment, you know, being destroyed, and it broke my heart. So when we talk about Durga, I would ask you, you know, what breaks your heart? You know, is it, for example, nowadays, you know, Black Lives Matter movement, or you know, environmental movement, maybe child protection movement? You know, what breaks your heart? So she sees evil, and she's an activist, but she's a very smart activist, because later I have to make this distinction before I move to Kali, because as you see, she is in control of her demons and of her Shaktis, of her tendencies. She is also, she knows how to build structures for her to help her cause. So for example, she would be the person that creates a new organization, for example, right? That is helping environment, or is helping human rights, or helping children. So she is the activist that builds structures in the external world. Am I expressing myself clearly? So she would be like head NGO, for example, right? Because she says, I see injustice and I'm going to fix it. You know, she's not just angry, she's going to fix it. She may be angry at the beginning, but eventually she does something about it, right? And she builds structures in the world. That's why she's in control, you see? Even in her anger, even if her anger is just. She says, no, I'm going to do something about it. So it's almost like I'm going to play the game to fix the system. She's about fixing the system, okay? And the reason, for example, so she's restorer of balance in the sense. When there's injustice, she does something to bring justice back wherever she sees the injustice. And so it could be environmental or human rights activists here, because I know that she's also participating in this event. I brought the example of Marianne Williamson, who is definitely a Durga person. So for example, when she decided to run during the American election, she says, I want to bring back balance to American politics, because I think American politics lost the moral balance. Right? So she thinks the moral balance was bust. She says, we lost heart. We don't have a heart anymore, right? In politics. I want to bring heart back to politics. I want to bring morality and balance back to politics. So not only she believed, okay, politicians are horrible, you know, I'm not going to vote. This is not Durga. Durga says, no, I'm actually running for a president, right? So that's why I bring her example. So she sees that something is wrong and she's doing something about it. So she's very active kind of archetype. What is the shadow of the Durga? It is sometimes, it's in scriptures, it is called arrogance, but it often means that I know that I'm right. And because I know that I'm right, I'm not willing to listen to anyone else. So this is shadow Durga. Even if Durga has a good cause, but this cause can sometimes blind Durga, meaning that she cannot listen to even other person's opinion because she's so focused on her cause, right? So this is a possible dark shadow of Durga. So very often Durga and Kali are put together, but I separated them because if Durga is building structures to improve what's going on in our society, so she's bringing justice when there was no justice, Kali lost her patience, okay? She's the goddess of revolution and transformation. She's the goddess who says, no, I want the change now. I am fed up with the system. It doesn't work. I want a change. I want a radical revolution. Okay, so that's why she says no. She says no. But I'm not improving anything. I'm not building structures. I destroy the structures and I build new structures. Right? Because what's here right now is not. It's so unjust that I'm not even interested in fixing it. So in spiritual terms, Durga is about radical transformation. Radical transformation. Very often she presents herself also as Kundalini movement. And, you know, it's radical Kundalini movement as well. So when you have Kundalini awakening, you know, I had a Kundalini awakening too. It's rather radical, you know. So, and actually, I read a book by a famous American scholar, Jeff Kripal, if you're interested, who you know, he's a very serious academic. He went to India and he was basically, his Kundalini awakening was so strong that he thought he was struck by a thunder, by lightning, you know, because it lasted several hours and completely transformed his life, and he changed his career and everything. So she's a goddess of radical change. Change now. I'm not building any structures. And in spiritual terms, it can be very confronting as well, because let's say you had a successful academic corporate career and now you want to be a Swami, let's say, or you decided that you're going to be environmental or human rights activist. So this is very radical and sudden change. And it's such profound change that there is no way back. Right? So it's not about balancing things like with Durga. It's very, very radical. So we don't really have time to discuss it, but Kali became very popular around 600 AD, and she's now already, you know, continues to be popular. Lots of young women identify with Kali, but sometimes when people who follow Kali forget one thing, that very often she's represented with different gestures that sometimes we forget to read them. One gesture, of course, is, you know, her tongue is in blood because she's so angry, so she just destroyed everything. But her other hand shows the gesture of compassion, which means says, hold on, I'm here with you as I'm destroying everything that doesn't serve you anymore. So she says, I am with you, you know, do not be afraid. Actually, now I remember the symbol, actually, the hand gesture is do not be afraid because I'm with you as I am destroying everything that doesn't serve you anymore. So it's a radical change. Is it clear? Yeah, so I'm with you, don't be afraid, but I'm destroying everything because it doesn't serve you anywhere. You have to grow now, right? So that's Kali. So Kali is the radical goddess. And I wanted to very quickly just, I don't know if we have time for it, say something about Lalita Maha Tripura Sundari. So she's called the goddess of the three worlds. So basically she embodies in many ways all other goddesses as well. So for me, she's my favorite because she's the quintessential Shakti. And I don't have the time to discuss her anymore in detail because I'm running out of time. However, I will just move on to a next slide, which a little bit summarizes what I wanted to say about Sundari as well. So I just want to say that this images.
Sorry, I just want to let you know that do you have a little bit more time?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any specific presentation after yours, so
okay.
You can finish. But then, if there's any more questions, we can spend another, 15 minutes or so.
Okay, in this case, I'll come back for a second to Tripura Sundari, okay? So she's a goddess of three worlds, because I want to speak why actually we have to redefine divine feminine, because these images are brought to us from ancient traditions and we are grateful for this. And they are very true images, but images can be interpreted for us. So I want to bring Sundari here because she's such a powerful goddess, and she was actually one of the favorite goddesses of a great 20th century Saint Ramana Maharshi, very famous Saint Ramana Maharshi, and he was supposed to be the incarnation of goddess Sundari, because the three words can be translated into many things, but basically it is basically says that she has a perfect will, perfect knowledge, and perfect action. So everything is perfectly aligned. She's like the completely empowered goddess. You know, so she's not just Saraswati, she's not just Durga, she's not just angry. She's completely empowered. Everything in her is balanced. So Bradley's previous question, you know, what about Shiva Shakti? So she's in a way that if you can see a fully empowered, here I'm just talking also about feminine, but fully empowered feminine embodies also the masculine part in her. It's Tripura Sundari, right? So it's the goddess of the three worlds. But the reason why I say that we have to get in charge of this kind of archetypes as well, because sometimes society doesn't service archetypes very well. And then it ends up demeaning women. Why? Because Sundari is also the beautiful one. So what happened to Sundari? Sundari became a name for cosmetics, also for some questionable massage parlors in India and so on. So she started to be demeaned and being seen only as the beautiful one, when in fact she's the fully empowered Shakti. She's the fully empowered feminine, you know,
I'm going to just check.
The ideal feminine, right? So that's why we, in a way, kind of have to be careful who interprets these images for us, right? So with both women and men, because so first of all, it's very much important for women to redefine this archetypes for themselves. But I must say, because as some of you know, I have a blog, and I must say that half of the people that support me and are most vocal in their support are men, which is a wonderful thing. They said, yes, divine feminine and women, you know, they have to be transformed, because we are equal, and women have to discover that power, not in an aggressive way, you know, although particular stage may be aggressive, like if somebody's in Kali stage, but you know, we have to find our own empowerment, right? Because traditionally women, even in religions, are disempowered, you know. So when I'm sorry, I have to move the images here. So so if these kind of images are basically stamps on our consciousness, on our psyche, they can offer us, like we discussed with Irina, certain choices and certain guidance, but it doesn't mean that we have to stick to one, right? We, in different circumstances, call for different archetypes. But at the same time, we also have to be in control of retelling the part that is up to us. So we have to be the ones that choose our archetypes. And I hope that I'm not insulting here anyone. But for example, in the past, the only archetype for a woman was actually the archetype of Parvati, the perfect wife and the mother. And it is a very beautiful archetype, but it is not the only archetype for a woman to explore. So I don't want to demean this archetype, right? So if you're Durga, if you're Saraswati, if you think that you have to explore something on your own, there are these archetypes. And there's a maybe time in your life that you want to actually explore those archetypes, right? So that's why Hinduism offers us these different archetypes, these different choices. Also, when I was at the beginning talking about Kena Upanishads and about Goddess Uma, how she basically enlightened Lord Indra, right? She brought knowledge to him. The reason why I think that we really have to be in charge of redefining these archetypes, because I will tell you how some traditional scholars interpreted this story. So one very famous scholar, I'm not going to name him, he said, when somebody asked him a question, and I found it on Google, why did Uma teach the biggest of all lords? And he says, oh, because male gods were busy, so they just sent a woman to talk to him. Right? So that's why we have to be careful, because there may be some demeaning going on because of some traditional take on the story, right? So we have to tell the story differently. So if not tell the story differently, interpret it in a way that empowers us. And why do we have to be empowered? This is what I'm saying, because yoga is about union, including the union of the feminine and masculine, as I have it on a slide, as equal aspects of the divine. So we cannot talk about divine, we cannot talk about God if one part of God or divine is completely demeaned and disempowered. If we are talking about unity, we have to talk about empowering the feminine as well, because Shiva Shakti is exactly that what Bradley said. So we have a strong Shiva and we have a disempowered Shakti. Then divine, there's no unity and the divine is not complete. That's why we need strong feminine divine, not because I want to replace masculine divine with feminine divine, but because for truly experience who we are, truly experience Shiva Shakti union and unity, we have to first define feminine with full respect and love. So that's basically my presentation. Thank you everyone for listening. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. If not, I can leave space for someone else. No? If there's no questions, so I don't know, maybe Irina, if you are here, let me know what I should be doing next.
Yes.
Because I think basically this is the end of my presentation. So if there are no questions, I'm happy to space for some.
Let me just quickly check the Facebook if there's any.
Okay, thank you.
Bradley said wonderful, so he enjoyed the presentation.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I did have another thought. What's the possibility and how these archetypes and energies play out collectively? Like, for example, we are in a Kali time, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. We definitely are in a revolutionary time. I know. So that's a very interesting question, and I actually have to think about it a little bit. And you know, very often people, especially in feminist circles, people talk about patriarchy. I'm very careful using this vocabulary, so perhaps I'm going to define it. I don't mean patriarchy as something masculine. I mean patriarchy when I'm using it as a system that outlived its usefulness. Okay, so if we talk about a system that maybe worked in the past, but outlived its usefulness, then this is what I call patriarchy. And I think that we have all kinds of signs, and that's my personal opinion, that's nothing to do with Hindu scriptures now, right? Is that we are definitely going through some systemic change, which I hope that is not going to be too violent, but I do believe that it's a necessary change. Because my personal feeling is that we are definitely at the end of an era, because there's lots of injustice, human rights injustice, economic injustice, and even environmental injustice. I'm also big on animal rights, and then I'm environmentalist, and I think that we cannot basically continue the way we continue. And in some ways it is, and I want to say again, it's not about men and women, it's about masculine and feminine, including women. Some of the most vicious politicians can be women, right, or corporate. So it's not about women and men. But these women act out of their strong masculine side, right? This kind of unchecked masculine. So it's not about men and women. So basically, what we truly, really now need is this feminine divine side that is more related to interrelatedness, to compassion, to cooperation, versus, for example, competition. And again, this is not men, women, it is masculine and feminine. And traditionally, these qualities were considered feminine qualities, more interconnectedness, more unity, more cooperation, right? And so there are feminine qualities that are both in women and men, and we definitely need it. And I hope that this is what our new era is going to be built upon, because traditionally we had like matriarchy, so it was, then we had patriarchy, in this kind of vocabulary, and now we have to find different ways. This Shiva Shakti, when the masculine and feminine are interconnected, because the masculine can provide structures, but there has to be this kind of compassionate side of the feminine there as well, right? If a masculine is about structures, this has to be compassionate, meaningful structure, not just structure for profit and exploitation. Yeah. So that's my opinion there.
Yeah, thank you.
And just,
do you want to add
so much? Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for organizing such a wonderful event for the whole week.
Yeah. Sorry, Antoinette, did you have a question, or did you want to add something?
No, I totally loved everything that you were saying, you know, Dr. Joanna.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Antoinette. It's a great pleasure. I'm really honored. Thank you so much. And it's beautiful to see you face to face.
Oh, yes.
Well, just, you know, Joanna, thank you for a really expert presentation as you took us through from a Hindu philosophical perspective, the divine feminine. It's interesting because in World Unity Week, we don't just have the main hall, but we also have all of these convergence rooms. And you may not know this, but one of the convergence rooms started as the sacred feminine room, and it was all content around the sacred feminine. But then some of the, actually it was the women, reached out to some of the men's groups for them to do some content around the sacred masculine. And so now the room has become, the exact name I'm not sure, but it's essentially the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine in one room. And there's going to be content. That's it, right? So that's all content around the week.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And in fact, there's a wonderful book about masculine, divine masculine by Zeus Yanis, an American writer who I think talks about spiritually evolved men. I think that title is something like that, but it's a fantastic book. And he talks about archetypes for a modern man from a perspective of the masculine, divine masculine. And it's a fantastic book. So this is that's why it's a Unity Week. You know, we have to work on it together. We have to polish our rough parts, feminine or masculine.
It's definitely about that, and also, you know, being in an emergent space. And it's no coincidence to be here with Irina, who's such a practitioner of Shakti as a yoga teacher, and her whole orientation, and Antoinette. Although we can't see any light on Antoinette's face, be good maybe if you can get a light going there. But Antoinette's been working on the divine feminine and has a perspective on the mother that a lot of different traditions talk about, and you know the divine feminine of the transcendental aspects of divinity, not just what we're in, but that which is also beyond as well. And so I think it's a very interesting. Hey, Antoinette, did you want to just go ahead, Joanna?
Ben, I'm gonna tell you right now, because now you got me like it's like 1 o'clock in the morning.
I know.
I'm so happy that you waited till 4 o'clock in the morning. But Antoinette is absolutely right. I just didn't cover this in this presentation because I was talking about, just archetypes, not about transcendental qualities, which I think I may have another presentation and I'll be talking about it as well. So transcendental qualities of a divine feminine as well.
Good. Did you want to say anything, Antoinette?
I'm very glad that you actually invited me, Ben, because you're always inviting me to everything, everything. But when I started to hear her speak, I was like, oh my God, there ain't nobody listening to this, because that's how it is. There's nobody listening to this, but we need to hear about the divine feminine. Everybody's asleep. Everybody's doing something else. They're talking about something else. We have all these other objectives, but also at the same time and everything. What you're speaking, Dr. Joanna, what you're speaking, and I have to tell you this as a sister to sister, it's a thing where we're trying to connect with other people, but also at the same time.
That's fantastic. And in fact, I'm sorry.
Sorry. That was me playing the video. There are 40 people tuned into this live around the world, just so you know. So before that, there were like 50, 60, 70, but at this point, there are still 40 people with us. So any comments, Antoinette, to Joanna while we have you?
Yes, let me speak right now, because like all the other women who are trying to say, let me speak, because we're trying to speak about our feminine, divine power right now. The things that she's saying and she's speaking about is very correct. It's all in alignment, but people do not understand it because they're hearing it in such a way that it cannot resonate with them within their heart and within their souls. But also at the same time and everything, it's totally correct. It's totally true. Because at this time, they're not understanding. We do have the feminine divine who are speaking to us. I'm going to take it down the rabbit hole. The spirit of truth, the spirit of wisdom, the spirit of intuition, the spirit of understanding, all these different things that the mother spirit and the mother divine is coming down from above all the way onto this planet to every single generation, every culture, every race, every human being on this planet, even men as well too, who are now just starting to like figure it out. They're just now trying to figure it out, you know, what is this feminine spirit that is coming within me and everything. I know, because my husband is he's the biggest feminist. He's more feminine than I am, but he understands it's like we have to have this kind of balance. You know, we have to have this balance between the male and the female. We have to have this balance between the positive and the negative. We have to have this balance to sit there and see and understand how everything actually works together. The women have always been there throughout history, and nobody ever recognizes this because they always see men as kings, but they never recognize the women who are behind them, who made these actualities actually happen. These things that are actually happening within, like from the birds and the bees, from all the plants and the animals, have to be between male and female. This is something that they don't understand. It's like this whole creation of the universe is male and female.
Absolutely.
And the feminine divine within all cultures, within all races, through all understandings, even what's going on today. And even when we saw in South Africa going on during apartheid, is the women, because the women are either going to be the ones who are going to sit there and throw rock stones, or they're also going to be the ones who will sit there and stay at home and comfort the children and continue to work and continue to sit there and be within the system. You could be within the system, be without the system. You could sit there and be like, you know, for the planet, without the planet, but the women are always the nurturers, the caregivers, the spiritual mothers on this entire planet for every single plant, for every single human being, for every single animal, for everything on this planet. And no matter who's tuning in or not tuning in, we have to know that the feminine divine is always there, that keeps us rocking and rolling throughout history and even today. And they will be the standard torch bearers who will carry us on as civilizations, no matter what, you know.
Absolutely, Antoinette.
Beautiful.
I hear you.
Beautiful.
It sounds like you've got a new admirer for your work, Joanna. It sounds like you have a new.
And I am definitely a great admirer of Antoinette, because what I was trying to say kind of academically, she said it straight from the heart, which is always much more powerful. So really well said, Antoinette. And I want to say that, yes, I have, I think, another presentation, and you are correctly that the intuition is the feminine. It's like, and also grace is portrayed as feminine, you know, in many traditions. And what is grace? You know, Meister Eckhart says it's a union of human and divine, you know, so the woman is this kind of bridge. So it's beautifully said. Thank you. I couldn't hope for a better conclusion for this talk. Thank you, Antoinette. I'm so glad we connected.
Does Sharon want to say anything, Joanna, do you think, just in sort of final reflections? Or Nina, if she's still here? Or maybe they're not here anymore. Well, thank you. We're going to end the live stream now. Joanna, anything?
Thank you once again. Thank you.
Irina?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Joanna. That was a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much.
And thank you for being here and encouraging me and inviting
Most
me.
welcome.
Thank you. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.